There's a running joke if you're in a restaurant with your partner and you don't like the food, get your woman to say something, right? So men, you do know that it's hard to speak up, or that it can feel uncomfortable, or you think, oh, it's not a big deal, or like you have all these questions in your mind about speaking up. But then when something happens to women and they don't, oh, why don't you say something?
Time is money, so spend yours listening to me talk about things that are important to me and my people.
Time is money.
Hello and welcome to Maya's Minutes. This is the second episode of the 8th series. This series is a heavy topic. We are discussing sexual violence in BAME communities. I want to give that trigger warning to anybody who might continue to listen. If you listen to the previous episode, you'll know the level of heaviness we're going into. And if you haven't listened to the previous episode, I would recommend doing so before you listen to this one to give you a gauge of what we have here. I am joined, as I am on every series, with an expert guest in the topic. And this series, I am joined by Dr. Amani. If you want to know about her and what she does, you can listen to the last episode, or you can just start here. It's up to you. But we're going to get straight into it. Last episode, you went into everything that you do, the thesis that you wrote, and how you got to the understandings and realizations that you've arrived at regarding sexual violence with Black and brown women. But I don't know what would make me do a job that is so traumatizing. You can argue that I still vicariously do that because I have conversations like this with people like you.
Yeah.
And I'm very, clearly know a lot of these things, so I've lived things. But to actually then go and do that as the choice of a job that I do to pay me, and I have to do it. It's not like I can't, because this is literally how I pay my bills. That's a bit of a big one. So do you mind explaining what happened to get here?
I don't even know myself sometimes. I always say to people, I was a very precarious child. I was like really in touch with emotions as a child, like my own. People used to call me sensitive all the time, like my family, whatever. But I grew up with, I'm Jamaican, bare cousins, loads of cousins. And I would see them get into it or something happening, and I'd be like, no, sit down, you sit down and you talk to, like, I would want to talk it out and like mediate. And then I would also I got a lot of responsibility put on me as well from adults, because I was seen as responsible and I could mediate things.
A young Black girl getting responsibility put on
you
them?
Imagine?
Never.
Wow. So I had a lot of responsibility put on me to be mature and be the mediator and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I was in touch with the loads of emotions. I could notice when things were off, and I would notice in my family as well, in the adults, and there would be that one cousin that's a bit off. Like, there's something going on here, but no one would tell me. Even though I'm meant to be really mature, but they wouldn't tell me because I'm still a child. But they would tell me if someone had diabetes or they had a heart attack or there was something physically wrong. But when that one cousin or that one person was acting funny, they wouldn't tell me, but I could feel it. And I was like, there's something going on. I don't understand what. And as I grew up, I was like, oh, it's mental health. But because I was so in tune with like dynamics and emotions, I would see how that one thing, person acting funny or having a mental health crisis, impacted so many different people, and I felt it, and I was like, no, I don't want that to happen to anybody. So I grew up like, oh, how could I stop that from happening? Didn't really have the language for it, didn't know what it was, right? I was a child. Then I watched Freaky Friday. Yeah, Lindsay Lohan.
Of course, they're doing a remake.
Banging, are they? Yeah. Banging film. Anyway, and I was watching it randomly, and the mom seemed like she had a cool job, so I Googled it. I was like, oh, she was a psychiatrist actually. But I was like, oh, okay, what's that? So then I ended up like looking into it a little bit more, and then it pieced together all the things I used to feel as a child. I was like, oh, they're the people that do the thing that I want to do. And then I just went with it. Like literally, I think I was 14. Wow. I decided when I was 14, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I went to obviously do my A-levels in it, got into uni to do it, went into the field to do it. I just carried on going.
And as you went, you didn't feel dissuaded by...
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Like a few times. It's annoying, actually, how many times. And I still came back. I have had a cake business in the meantime. I went into international development for like 6 months as well. And then I always came back because, for me, there's something about the history of our people that has done a number on us, on our community. It's crazy. Like, they've really done their big one. They've done their job on us, right?
That's a word.
And I think that as a psychologist, my core training can help on different levels. I could have just been a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with just training in a specific therapy, but to me it wasn't enough, because you can only help someone individually. I wanted to be in a position where I could help on different levels. So I can do an individual therapy with someone, I can do couples therapy, I can do families therapy, or I can think about teams and services and manage those and direct those, or I can do research and I can influence policy, or I can go into government. Like, there's so many different things I can do with this role.
So for you, you understood very early that yes, helping people on an individual level is important and necessary, but we aren't going to make generational changes that way.
Absolutely.
We need to reach a bigger group to do that.
Yeah.
And I need to be at the top so I can filter it out.
I need to do the top qualification that I can do, and that's what I did. And I was a child and I didn't have the words. I didn't know. I just had a feeling. I was like, okay, I think if you did this and if they spoke a bit better to each other, then that would change something. But I didn't have the words. It was only through going through this career and learning about it when it all kind of pieced together for me. So yeah, I do have moments to this day where I'm like, oh God, why am I doing this? Because I'm exposed to trauma. I hear horrific things every single day. Where I'm dealing with people's emotions every single day. I do feel things, and it works in my advantage for my job, because it means I feel things that people can't even say to themselves.
Yep.
Right? So the thing that's on the surface, so I might be getting, like, with parents get a lot of anger. It's not as anxiety. So I speak. So now I know I speak to the anxiety. I don't speak to the anger. So it helps me. And then all of a sudden they start the phone call really angry, and all of a sudden, oh my God, thank you so much.
Disarmed.
So they decide, because I guess they're not used to someone that can navigate emotions that way. So it has helped me, but it's draining at times. Can't lie to you.
Okay, so previous episode we spoke about the adultification of women and the effect this has on them. And I think that's something that we don't have a language for, we don't talk about, and we definitely don't give enough airtime to in our communities. And I think the first way this plays out is with family members, distant, hopefully, but still people that shouldn't be, taking advantage and leering and touching and who knows how much further in the family. And it always happens around the puberty kind of age.
Yep.
Where you are suddenly, as a woman, you're suddenly aware of this body you have now, and you're aware of how people are looking at you. And you're also aware of how the people who care about you are acting around you. Previous to this, wear what you want, no one cared, off you go, have fun. And now suddenly people are a bit more like your mum's questioning you a few more times, or not even questioning, just telling you straight, no, you can't wear that, a bit more. So why do you think it is that and I don't know if this is a white thing, I can't speak because I haven't experienced things through a white lens, but from my perspective, mum's Punjabi, my dad's from Trinidad, I've seen on both sides there is a lot of permission and when, like, a lot of excusing. The behaviour is very excused when it comes to older men leering on younger women. Why don't we call it paedophilia?
Because,
or is it? Do you think it is?
Well, when you're
an older man and looking at a younger woman.
A woman in a sexual way. Yeah. Absolutely.
Good. Yeah. Okay, fine. No. Absolutely. I have to check because some people will be like, oh, it's not that.
What is it then?
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. I think we, as this generation, are starting to have those conversations with our parents. And our parents might come back to us and be like, no, it's not that. Because if they actually accept that it was that, and this person is someone maybe who stayed in our house and they willingly gave a bed to whilst we were in the house, that's now going to start opening a lot of doors in their head that they can't afford to do. So absolutely. Why do you think it is, on a deeper level, from all the research and reading and everything that you've done, that we are there? We don't call it for what it is.
I guess our cultures are patriarchal, right? Bit of a paradox, doesn't really make sense either, because it's like, oh no, men have to run things and lead things and are seen as more logical and stronger provider, all of those things. You don't question it. But at the same time, we permit them to be like reckless and primitive. It doesn't actually make sense.
Because how can someone in that who's acting like that be our providers and our supporters and our leaders?
It actually doesn't make sense, right? We come from the cultures and the ideologies that run through the cultures, permit us to not question them. right? And allows that behavior to happen because you don't question them, and also excuses them, and it says, oh, they can't help it, or of course, because you have breasts, of course it's going to happen. Like again, it's just part of the narrative, it's part of the culture, it's part of the ideology that runs through the culture, and we're trying to break that, I guess. And I guess whilst that shift is happening, so we've got like our parents' generation or the generation before that, you are still very much like, even before that, I still have great grandparents that are alive, right? So they're still there with their ideologies, and we have a new generation coming up, conflicts, we're jarring against each other because we're trying to find a new status quo. And whilst you're in that turmoil, humans don't do well with turmoil emotionally, right? We don't do well with it. We like things to be quite stable, but the thing is, life is messy, so that's where the conflict comes in. But yeah, whilst that turmoil is happening, you're going to get what we're hearing. You're going to get people's defenses going up, and those defenses can look like, no, it's not that, it's dismissing us, or it can look really aggressive, and it's like, you lot are the problem, and why are you questioning how men operate? It's all defenses, because we're going through this really tumultuous time in society because there are different ideological battles happening at the same time.
That's a good point you make. And I was having this conversation with my mum about something else, because she often, in my opinion, has a thing where she people pleases too much. And this is common of women, minority women, particularly Asian women. I hate to say it this way, but they are raised to not question, and they're raised to accept, and they're raised to suppress what they really feel and just like be okay with it. Someone sent your house for 6 weeks, that's fine. Your man's just cheated on you, and that's all right. Your man's just hit you, no, that's fine. I can't make too much of a fuss. That is, and just really riles me up. And especially when I speak to obviously someone I care about, I'm like, no, don't. So she often has this situation where she's speaking to women who are either her age or slightly older, apart from the Punjabi community, and they have ignorant views about a lot of things, race, men, patriarchy, whatever it might be. And she had an interaction recently where one of her friends' mums said something to my mum, either about me and am I married yet, or something like that. And my mum was like, no, she's not. She lives with her boyfriend who she's been with for 8 years. So yeah. And she was very unapologetic about it.
Okay.
And then I know. And so the friend came to my mum and said, it was so good that you said that to my mum. Because my own mum is in denial about my brother, who's been with his long-term partner, doing nothing wrong, but just happily being with each other. But my mum's so upset about it. She wants them to get married. She feels so much shame, etc. And so with my mum saying that, and my mum's obviously like a similar age to that friend's mum, it was like, oh wow, so this is okay. And I was saying to my mum, yeah, it's so good that you done that. It's like, as you should. And she said, yeah, but I could never do that to someone else, maybe someone who's a bit older, and they said something, I would just take it. And I said, yeah, but you do realize, by us, my opinion is, by us not questioning and by us not putting them right, we are harboring this sense of wrong reality. At the time, like the example you gave about your great grandparents, there wouldn't have been language for paedophilia. There wouldn't have been language for sexual harassment and violence. But us telling them this is what it is, and them not liking it, I don't think we should be responsible for them not liking it and then shying away from the conversation. I think the longer we don't have the conversation with them, whilst we see it as, yeah, but they're old and they're not going to be here soon, so just let them live in peace, and what can they really change? That is still keeping a lot alive. By not puncturing that thought process, we are still allowing that rhetoric to live and that shame to live on through us. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Do you think?
No, I agree with it. And I think it's interesting because we're saying, oh, we should let them live in peace. We negate older people's mental health as well, I think.
Agree.
I've worked with older adults, and it comes to get them. All of the traumas and stuff. We're saying, oh, let them live in peace, but because of their shame, they're actually not telling you, actually they're really depressed.
Absolutely.
They're really anxious. They're really traumatized. Right? But because they have to put the front, because that's what they've been told they need to do as elders, we're not seeing it. And we don't actually realise that some of those conversations could actually be really powerful for them.
Totally.
And actually really help them in whatever time they've got left. It could actually be really, really helpful for them to normalise that actually what I went through
isn't okay.
way back actually wasn't okay. Did therapy with quite a few older people, and they would tell me horrific stories about maybe that war, but a lot of sexual violence as well, because that was normalized. And they were like, I didn't know. It was just a feeling.
It was the time.
And it was the time. And now they're coming to a place in their lives where they're not as busy, because they were probably busy raising kids and then raising grandkids, and now they've got grown grandkids, and it's like, oh wait, my life is slowing down. All that stuff starts to come back for a lot of people. So I'm saying that to say that I think we're doing a disservice as well to them individually and their own emotional well-being by not having those conversations. Yes, the defenses could come up, but we don't know what could come on the other end of it, what could be helpful for them individually, but us as a community as well.
And like how you were saying, like when you're met with defense from parents, for example, it's actually just anxiety.
Yeah.
When people are listening to this and they're like, do you know what, I'm going to have that conversation with my nan about racism, for example, they will likely be met with, how do they navigate that from like an emotional perspective, so that you're not triggering them, but you're also trying to get it through slightly?
You could have a comment, like, so instead of saying you are racist, for example, you used racism as an example, you can sort of have a roundabout conversation about it and about what other people might think, and then be curious. Just always be curious. I'm wondering, what do you think? Why do you think that? Instead of attacking the person, just being like wondering around it. And if, as much as you can, everyone has different abilities to do this, I think. Hear what's underneath it. Like, what are they actually saying underneath it? So that takes a lot of practice, to be fair, in my experience, but just start to hear what's underneath it. Is it fear, actually, of the unknown and uncertain? And question them and wonder about it with them, opposed to like head on, because you're just hitting defense with defense. You're not really going to get anywhere.
That is the advice I should take. I'm known to just being, Okay. And we spoke as well in the last episode about how you were saying, if you could make the NHS and the services the way that you want them to for survivors of sexual violence, one of the big things you would do would be to help integrate community and grassroots with the services and hopefully mend that relationship. So let's talk a bit about why the relationship is so broken, and then how that then plays into why women report things less.
Yeah. The history of psychiatry is racist and built on eugenics.
We spoke about this in series 1 when I had my guest Jaspreet.
Yes.
And we spoke about contraception and how the beginnings of contraception was by eugenics. And they just did a test on South American women who all came out after taking the first pill that was invented. All came out and said, this is severely affecting me. This is really bad for me. I'm getting really bad reactions from it. Women even died. And they said, oh, well, Latina women are known to be quite dramatic. So it's fine. The pill works. Let's go. No one got pregnant, so it works.
There we go. So it's just a good example. And yeah, psychology, the mental health field is not that different, which has meant that the way that mental health diagnoses have been conceptualized and applied to people differs in race, between races, and also the treatment of people is then different as well. So we do know that Black men in particular are disproportionately diagnosed with things like schizophrenia and psychosis. They're stigmatized of mental health conditions. And we also know that that's true for Black women as well, Black and brown women, but Black men are kind of the highest. We also know that the treatment within services historically is horrific, full stop, to be honest, with anybody, but particularly with minoritized people. They are more likely to be restrained, and they're more likely to have medical interventions, so sort of given an injection to calm them down, opposed to maybe de-escalating in a different way.
By talking, by saying what's wrong with you, or disarming them.
I remember having, so when I used to work on the wards, alarms going off all the time. So you used to walk around with like a belt and keys and then an alarm. And then when the alarm goes off, the whole hospital knows, and you go to a screen to see where it's happening, and everyone runs to it, right, to try and see what's going on. And then I thought one day, what if I and other staff members just spend a day on the ward and just see what it's like to engage with people, opposed to leaving them to their own devices. Spent a day there. I'm not going to lie, it is quite tiring, right? But spent a day there just talking with them. Oh, should we do some crosswords? Oh, like, what are you having for dinner today? Oh, like, just constantly engaging them. Less alarms, right? So just even doing that isn't afforded. And there's so many different reasons, I won't get into it, why that isn't afforded. But what it means is that we're having to use really restrictive and dehumanizing practices for people where there's different methods that aren't considered. And part of it is fear, right? There is this idea of the cycle of mistrust and distrust in services. And staff members, for their own reasons, and services for their own reasons, have a perception of the people that they're meeting. And part of it is to do with race. And when you come with that perception, that is negative, and that perpetuates this idea that you need to come with aggression because they're going to be aggressive, or automatically you're heightening the situation, and you're more likely to intervene in an aggressive way. That means that we have seen in families, family members being horrifically treated. And we've seen people's children be taken away wrongly. We've seen people be medicated wrongly, misdiagnosed, overdiagnosed. We've seen horrific things. The community is now going to be like, why would we go there? I don't trust these people. And understandably, because there's been horrific incidences. And there's a fear about how you will be treated. Absolutely understand that. There's also this idea of you don't air your dirty business, your dirty laundry, right? You don't check your business to other people, right? So that's a cultural narrative as well.
Yep.
I said in my thesis, and I said it so we have to do a viva as well. So your thesis is then examined. So a bunch of people read it and then they question you, like they grill you about it. Like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did that? I was met with 3 white people, even though my thing is about Black women. And I said it, and they did talk about it. They said, "Oh, we appreciate that we're white people." So they named
Acknowledged
it. They
it.
acknowledged it. But I did preface I wrote it down in my thesis, and I said it to them. I want you to know that anything I'm saying in regards to Black women's responses to service is a response to oppression.
Yeah.
It's not an inherent disorder or deficiency or anger or aggression. It's a response to. And the mistrust is there for a reason. There are systematic oppressions and disgusting things that are happening that have bred distrust within our communities, understandably so. However, we are now left with the detriment of it, because now there's a shame around, there's a distrust and a shame around actually going. So you were asking about how does that filter into women underreporting? It's shameful. It's scary, for one. You know, the amount of times I have conversations with, especially parents and people like, I don't really want to tell you this because you might take my kid away. I'm like, I'm probably not going to. Like, you're probably going to tell me most likely going to tell me something that's absolutely fine and normal. But there's just this apprehension and anxiety that as soon as you meet me, I'm going to take your children away and I'm going to put them in hospital or something like that. It's probably most likely not going to happen. But that fear is there. Women have that fear, so they won't report things. Then put on top of it the idea of everything that we've been talking around the sexualization of women and the stereotypes that are placed on women, Black and brown women, especially Black women, around things like the Jezebel, that kind of thing that is perpetuated through media. You're going to be there like, oh, but they're going to think it's my fault. Oh, but then what are my parents going to say?
I remember, so in lockdown, so I had a podcast before I did this podcast, and it was with me and 2 other ladies. And then we stopped recording in lockdown, and I obviously couldn't contain myself, so I started doing lives on Instagram, and I would do a different topic, and I would have an expert. So you could say it was the beginning of Maya's Minutes.
Okay, now.
And I had a lady join once, and she was I believe she was a support worker or someone up there for women in the north of England who were domestic abuse survivors. And that extends to rape survivors and everything else sexual violence related. And she was saying that for women of that demographic, she was working mainly with Asian Muslim women, you couldn't risk giving your phone to the police, which is an integral part of reporting sexual violence, because then you might expose on there that you have a partner or a boyfriend.
Right.
That then might come out to your family, and you could risk really, really dangerous things happening to you. Your family could really sometimes kill you over that. And so I think there's a massive part of the way that we would break those fears and angers we have in our communities towards these systems, police, NHS, etc., would be if they were more culturally sensitive.
Absolutely.
Because in certain cultures, you cannot be asking for certain things and doing certain things in the way that you do them without any regard for what the consequence is going to be. So even when you mentioned about the overdiagnosis, to overdiagnose a black man or woman with schizophrenia or something of that ilk, and then they have to now go home to their families, share that, or it will be shared on their behalf that that's happened. Like, I don't think the services quite understand the consequences of that. Even depression. If you have a depression in certain homes, in our cultures, you're looked at as absolutely crazy. So what do you think schizophrenia and bipolar and all of these things are going to have the effect of? So I think that there's a massive tone deafness.
Yes,
there's no reading of the room, and there's no understanding. And then the only way we get that is if we employ more people who look like us. But then why should they have to be the ones who fight against all the racism? They hear it every day. They're in the rooms with everyone. I think as women, we are always in a situation, if it's from a gender perspective where we have to fight for our rights, or from a race perspective where we have to, because we're around white girls who might say culturally inappropriate things, etc. I don't really think boys or black men in the same way have to do that until they're faced with it, and it's hard. So, like, I say that to say that if we aren't having more of us in these environments, we can't expect their cultural narrative and understanding to change. But we also need to have the correct support in place for when we are in these environments, because it's going to be hard.
Yes, absolutely. The well-being of those staff members from those backgrounds also needs to be prioritised and thought about. All staff members, it needs to be prioritised and thought about, to be honest, because you're hearing horrific things, but the cultural sensitivity, I don't really know what the buzzword is at the moment in terms of like that kind of training. Providing the training to allow people to understand culture and how to think about these things and explore these things with people is also key. Like you said, how is this diagnosis going to land? I spend a lot of time, to the frustration of some of my managers, in terms of how long I keep people open. That's because I take my time and I'd be like, we're having an appointment and we're doing this assessment. What does it mean if I give you this diagnosis? What does that mean for you?
What are the consequences? What will you have to go home and do?
Yeah, what is going to be the understanding you have of yourself now? And I explore that with children and their parents, right? Because it's not a small thing. It's actually not. Like, you can't just fling out these labels and think nothing of it. Like, it's actually, unfortunately, it's life-changing.
Yeah, and you're not thinking about the kind of narrative your patient has grown up with hearing around this label you're about to give them. They might have grown up hearing, oh yeah, you know, uncle, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he's schizo, he might have, blah, blah, blah. You know him, yeah, he's a bit weird. And now you're going to give this person that label. So now they're only going to think about how their uncle was spoken about, how everyone ignored him at the family parties, how no one really went near, everyone said he was weird. That's who you now think you are. And they, like you said, you're taking the time to actually ask, what will this mean? And then, but if that's not happening, which doesn't majority of the time.
Yes, it's potluck who you get, to be honest. And again, multiple reasons as to why that is. I don't think anyone is ill-intentioned in these jobs, but luck of the draw. And I think thinking about women who might be wanting to report and go into services, they might be scared, oh God, what are they going to give me? Are they going to say I'm this? Are they going to say I'm that? Are they going to diagnose me with something? That's scary within itself as well. And it's something that we need to think about. It's something that services need to think about, because it's continuing that perpetual cycle of mistrust. Yeah.
And in terms of your research and the people you've worked with regarding sexual violence, have you done any work or research into the perpetrators?
I haven't. I've done a little bit of reading around it when I was doing my thesis. But there's a lot of work that is starting to be done, I think, a bit more. Most of it is thinking around, I guess, ideologies that influence people perpetrating, and again around generational trauma and the norms that have been put in place and how you interact with people. A lot of the people that the survivors that I've worked with, or especially within the hospital, have also been perpetrators of other things as well, right? And that a lot of the time has had to do with the modeling that they've had as a child, how to interact with people, how to manage your emotions, how to communicate. They haven't had those opportunities. So there is work, but I haven't personally done it, but there is work being done to think about those things. Yeah.
What would you say to a woman who has experienced some sexual violence and doesn't want to report?
If you can, you only need one person. Sort of statistic, or the thing in research is that you just need one person to believe you, especially children with child sexual abuse. You just need one adult to believe you and advocate for you. So if you have that person, please find that person. And I know that's a lot of work and it's very exhausting, but I really hope that you do have that person. You just need one person. You can take your time and think about how you do it. Don't rush. Be compassionate to yourself. I would also say it wasn't your fault. Because if no one's going to tell you, if you're not going to tell yourself, I'm going to tell you now. It wasn't your fault.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Did you watch Baby Reindeer?
I did watch Rain. Yeah, I did.
And did you find it disturbing?
Yeah, interesting, disturbing. I think it did everything it was meant to do.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it did everything it was meant to do.
I've spoken to a lot of people, and I might cut this out because I don't know if I want to share, but I've never admitted ever that I actually experienced some sexual violence as a child. And I watched that episode, and I watched it with my partner, and he was really taken aback by it. He was like, "Oh my God, it's just, can you imagine? That's so wrong." Like, really, like, outwardly disgusted by what we watched, which was the effect, like you said. And I just didn't say anything, and I just thought, oh God. And I felt it bubbling for a while. I felt like, because I think that's common with what happens when something happens to you at a young age, you can suppress it for a while, especially because of the shame and the anger. And even when I spoke to you, when we first had our conversation about doing this, it didn't even come to my head that I would talk about this or say anything. I wouldn't even give it air, because I was like, what happened to me was nothing in comparison to what's happened to other women.
Right.
So I know it's not worth talking about, and I'm fine. Do you know, I'm fine. So has it really, like, come on, let me just put that to the side of my head. Nothing's wrong. And again, that's something that a lot of us do, and I know that that's common. And so when we watched it, I just felt it come bubbling out, and I was really scared. The person I was most scared about telling was my partner, because I know he loves me, and it would really upset him. But also, he's very vocal about, like, not that anyone isn't, about how wrong child sexual violence is.
Right.
So I've always been like, fucking hell, if only you knew that, like, you know, I had a childminder who used to touch me inappropriately, and I didn't have the words. And the thing is, my mum was really big on anything that ever happened, because she's a psychotherapist. Right. So she'd worked with a lot of people who'd had this happen. So she didn't let us go on sleepovers. She was very prevention about this. And she would speak to me about it, and she would say, look, if anything ever happens to you, I'm going to believe you. Don't question it. You can tell me. No one should touch you there, blah, blah, blah. And I really feel like, for me anyway, definitely part of it was that I didn't feel confident, and I had low self-esteem because I was quite chubby as a kid, which sounds silly, but because I was quite chubby as a kid, it meant that I matured faster, A, and B, I didn't feel desired at the same time everyone else did. So I think that made my self-esteem lower, and I think that predators prey on that.
Yeah.
If you have low self-esteem, they're gonna pounce. And so for me, I just felt like I can't say anything. It was shame. I felt really ashamed, and I felt like I must have done something, and for me to have allowed that means I'm in the wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it's quite interesting that it's taken a show which was around a man and a man experiencing sexual violence for me and so many others to start talking about what's happened to them.
Yeah.
Because we're so desensitized to watching women have it.
We're so desensitized to watching women. We are. And I think the sad state of affairs, to the point where we're having to you've seen the posters on the tube.
It's
Staring
wrong.
is wrong.
I know.
So
yeah, but that seems so new. Like, I was on the plane on the way home from my holiday, and this guy, before we're in Portugal, and when we were in the waiting area, this guy was sat next to, like, I'm here, my partner's here. He was sat next to my partner. He was staring at me so strong whilst my partner's next to me. So I was like, okay. But immediately, because I'm conditioned that way, I go to, he must not be well. Because why is he's not well? Cool, let me ignore it. Then my partner's talking to me and I'm spacing him and I can see this guy staring at me. So I look at this guy like, and then my partner obviously realizes and he turns to him and he's looking at my partner like not unscathed. So I was like, there's got to be something. Anyway, we got on the plane and my partner's like vibrating, like he wants to go over and say something, but he's like, if I do that, then none of us are getting on the plane because this could kick off, blah blah blah. So we go on the plane, we have the flight. 2 young girls complain to the air hostesses there's a man being very inappropriate, sticking his tongue out, touching himself, looking at us in a really creepy way. He's sought us out to come and sit next to us in the plane. We've had to move. Can something be done? He then, when we landed, police came on the flight and took him off, and then he was let through customs just like everyone else was. But I spoke to the girls and I said, I'm so impressed that you were able to report that. Yeah. Because that takes a lot. And I think of me, even they were about 16, I wouldn't have been able to do that at 16. Yeah. That was happening left, right, and centre at 16. Yeah. On the bus, like everywhere, men were I remember having to tell men all the time I was 15 for so many years. And I remember there being a meme saying, not every day tell me you're 15, sometimes tell me you're 16. And it's like they find it was laughable how disgusting they were. Yeah.
It's so normalized and almost made a joke to the point, we're like desensitized to women's pain, to women's experiences. Like it's automatically, oh, she's doing too much, she's complaining too much. And people dismiss how much it actually takes to speak up about something.
100%. It
does. There's a running joke, right, about how if you're in a restaurant with your partner and you don't like the food, get your woman to say something, right? So men, you do know that it's hard to speak up. Yep. Or that it can feel uncomfortable, or you think, oh, it's not a big deal. Or like you have all these questions in your mind about speaking up. But then when something happens to women and they don't, oh, why don't you say something?
And it's also like a lack of understanding where a lot of the times men are like, if that's happened to you, let's go to the man's house now and kill him. Let's do that. And they don't quite get that that's not really an option because this might be the father of my kids. This might also be my long-time partner. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not really that understanding. And even women as well. That's why I asked you in the first episode, can you define sexual violence? Because there's so many blurred lines when it comes to relationships. What is and isn't okay sexual wise in a relationship?
And we're making it worse with all of our blurrings of like relationships, like situationships and all of these things. Like we're actually not helping at all. Speak on that
a little bit, please, because I think this all the time.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we are blurring a lot of lines, and this is my own kind of thinking, right? I think some of the blurring of the lines and all of these different types of like stages in relationships, etc., is to absolve people of the responsibility of just being good humans. Well, see, we were only talking. Of course, I could have slept with that other girl. Like, it's just to absolve responsibility. Just be a good person, regardless of what kind of interaction or what level of relationship you think you are with that person. Just be a good person. Just be respectful. Just make sure there's consent. But I think the blurring of the lines is taking that away, and we just think we can just be like, people are disposable, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't like it.
How is the sexual violence becoming more of an issue? I have my views on this, but from your perspective, by the rise in situationships.
How is it becoming more of an issue? I guess, it goes back to what I was saying about the blurring of boundaries. And I think some of the ways I've seen it spoken about on social media has meant that the person that you're engaging with in that situationship is you dehumanize them. So there is this narrative of it just having to be like the love is taken out of it and the care is taken out of it. Which when you do that and you remove that aspect of sex, because yes, it's a physical act, but there's also an emotional aspect to it.
And coming back to the physical, even an aspect of like, is this still okay for you? Are we having constant check-ins here?
Constant check-ins.
Like, are we discussing throughout the act that this is okay? Because you know, we are changing beings. Certain times of the month, even you're more sensitive than others. And if you have a longer term partner, when I say longer term, I mean longer than like a few conversations or a few times of hooking up, the person should start to understand this and know this. So they will be aware of that and they will be checking in with you. Like, is this still okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, check-ins.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think when you are having a situationship, the chances are you're not going to have the confidence to have those conversations during. Like, I hear about people where they're like, oh yeah, you know, night out, tired, whatever, I just got back, I didn't really want to, I was half asleep, but you know, before I knew it, was putting a condom on. So like, how are you giving consent with that then? And the thing is, I've had this conversation with a few of my friends and I was quite taken aback actually, because I was speaking to one of my friends who is a white girl. And so automatically when you're white, I wrongly or rightly assume you've had more exposure and have been given more freedom to ask for what you want and advocate for yourself in a sexual way, more so than if you are black or brown, because there is more role modeling of it for you, and also because you aren't going to be shamed in the same way. So she was telling me that she went home with a guy, she was really drunk, etc., and she doesn't remember it, but she just woke up and she was a bit sore. And I was like, but you didn't, so how could you have given consent then? She was like, oh, well, I couldn't really. And I was just so taken aback at the casualness of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's me going too far into being like, you're overthinking it, if she's happy, leave it. Or if it's that she doesn't actually know that that's not okay. And she also doesn't have the language, etc. Because in my books, that is bordering on non-consensual sexual violence in my book. But then I'm also in a completely different situation where I've been in a long-term relationship for so long, and every single friend I speak to says, you don't know how bad it is with the state of the men out here now. So now we've given up on the option of like a long relationship. Now it's just like, do I like this person after seeing them a few times? Cool.
Wow. Yeah, we don't know. I know what you mean. Is like, oh, is she actually happy or does she really know? And that's quite uncomfortable actually to sit with. Part of my brain is saying she might not have had the language and she's maybe normalized that as an experience. I'm also wondering, like, you know, how much of us as women have a view of sex that sees us as the object that gets done to.
That.
So is it that? Is that she's normalized that, or women have normalized that, okay, this is an act for the man. Right? It's about him finishing, and it's about his pleasure, and you perform ridiculous amounts. The performative nature within us is insane, actually. Is that the thing that that's
holding
operating there and
yeah.
holding on to? Is that what's up? As long as he, like, it's fine because I'm an object and it got done and it is what it is, and my pleasure in this and my consent is downplayed. And I do think that's something that gets played out, especially in these more casual relationships.
I think that even if you have a casual relationship, if you have a better understanding that sex is not that, which is that you're not the object, and you are also a being that deserves pleasure, then you will be well armed even in your casual relationship.
Absolutely.
But I think the lack of education on that point specifically is insidious, which is the word you used already, which I loved, among our understanding of sex, period. So then you apply it to a relationship, you apply it to a casual thing, same outcome.
Yeah. And especially in those situationships or casual relationships, or the way that they're being conceptualized for us to remove any emotion and it just be fun, it takes away actually all of the stuff.
But fun for who though?
It's meant to be fun for the guy, isn't it? It's meant to be fun for the guy. But we do need to educate and make sure that women feel empowered in their sexual decisions. And I think that the way it's been sold at the moment, or the conversations I've seen, especially on social media, they think that sexual empowerment and liberation means freeing it up or being a city girl or anything. It encompasses the whole spectrum. It also is the one that decides, I actually want to be celibate.
Thank you.
Like, that also is a decision that someone has made and a conclusion
I want to be loud and proud about my decision to only sleep with people that I feel X, Y, and Z towards.
Yeah. It's gonna be a huge spectrum of people. It's not just one or the other. And I think that's where the education comes in.
But what's the easier one to celebrate? The one who's freeing it up and
and it's
that's the sexier one.
It's a sexier one. We can sell it more, like it makes money. But it's not really helping the conversation, in my opinion.
Final sentiment. That was heavy, but I told you it would be. So here we go. How do we educate our men more and then not have to have as much pressure on policing our women?
It starts from young, right? There has to be conversations happening when men are young. I think the thing that I try and get across when I speak to men about this kind of thing is that I'm not attacking you as a person. This is an ideology, right? That you have just benefited from and you've benefited from, and you're just a bit more privileged in that sense. So maybe you don't see it and how it oppresses other people. It's an ideology. It's not you as a person. So separate yourself from that. And if you can't, question why you can't separate yourself from that, because that makes me question a few things about you. But we need to have a bit more education, starting from very young, about sex, like I said before, consent, healthy relationships, managing emotions. A lot of it is an emotional thing as well. Rejection, for example. So you've moved to me, I've rejected you, you can't manage your emotion, all of a sudden you're cussing me out, but you were moving to me 2 seconds ago, so what's the truth? Managing emotions. Yes, it's uncomfortable to be rejected, but it doesn't mean you can now be violent, right?
Isn't that a word?
So I think that's also part of it. I think that's missing as well in it all.
Do you think that those conversations, because I have got 1,000 people I know of, boyfriends, friends, family members, whoever, where the mums have said, you do not touch a woman like this, you do not do this. If a woman says no, that means no, etc. Certain times the man still ends up doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So is it a matter of hearing those things from a woman or from a man? Do you think that makes a difference?
Right. No, I hear what you're saying. There's gonna have to be education and conversations from everybody. This is a collective effort.
Yeah, it needs to be the same hymn sheet, I think.
Everyone has to be on
your
the same.
Your dad can't be saying to you, which is the case sadly for a lot of us, how many women have you slept with, and your mum saying to you don't ever sleep with women, blah blah blah. There needs to be the same
hymn sheet.
Yeah.
And we need to come to a collective decision about how we're doing this, and it has to be from the same hymn sheet. And I think it has to be with the most oppressed at mind, which is the woman.
Very true.
And also as well, recognize that this conversation it's majority about women, because it majority affects women, but it also affects men as well. There's sexual violence within men, and there's the similar ideologies fueling that as well. So this isn't just about us, this is also about changing sexual violence for men as well. It's an ideology, it's not you as individuals. It's just a new way of operating within the world and with each other that, it's a collective effort.
Do you think there's hope and things are getting better?
You know what? I actually, at times I don't, and at times I do. The times I do is when I hear like my Gen Z cousins talking, or like even the ones younger than them. Like one of them, I think someone said something about her having to cover up or something, and she was like, "Don't body shame me," and I was like, "Oh, I wouldn't have said that at 13 or something." Like, so they know, right? They're a bit more.
They've got the
language
more
switched on. Yeah. They've got the language to like kind of say these things now and express it, and they're about it, right? So I do have some hope, and I think as well, I don't want to dismiss the work that we've done as a generation. My mom has expressed, and her friends actually, and my aunties have expressed how impressed they are with me and my friends. She's like, you lot, like, we didn't think the way that you lot used to think. My mum and dad have been together since they were 18. I liked him. We got a house. we had some kids, we got married. Like, it just happened. It wasn't intentional, but you lot really think about these things, and you really think about your finances, you really think about your future, you really think about your enjoyment, you think about your mental health. You're really intentional. And I think that's an amazing thing, because there's like 26 years between me and my mum. You know what I mean? Big changes have happened in that time. So I think we've done a lot of stuff as well. And I hope that we're able to instill something in our children as well that will change things.
I agree. I think things like that for me as well, like we're seeing those girls report that guy on the plane. I was like, okay, things are changing. Like they are definitely. And my cousin, she's like 21. Certain things she won't stand for. I'm like, yes, girl. Yeah, I love that for you. And yeah, I agree with everything you said there, really, which is that like we have made way, and that's why they're able to do that.
Yeah.
But equally, we can't take away from what they're doing single-handedly.
Yes.
The conversations they're comfortable having. Even now, I'm like, fucking hell, how are they doing that? But I'm impressed.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think collectively, if we don't think that there's hope, we will struggle. So there is hope.
there's hope. But I do understand that it's hard as well, because we're seeing a rise in conversations to do with femicide.
But this is the first time we have platforms. I think those conversations have always lived and existed. I just think we haven't ever heard them on such a big scale before.
I hear that.
Anyway,
the word.
On that note, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
We will see you in the next episode. And thank you, listeners. I appreciate this is heavy stuff, but I hope you also agree that this is necessary stuff. Please continue to support, subscribe, follow, reshare, download, listen, send it to your friend, whatever you can do. It all means a lot, and it's really, really appreciated. See you in the next episode. Bye.